Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer, and I'm from Better by the Day, and actually, a new um, life coach, I would say, or just coach, mentoring support for people who have been harmed by psychiatric drugs, benzodiazepine in particular. I've kind of dove into this. I would say in the past 4 or 5 months with everything that I have, and including getting a certification, but there was no specialized one particularly for this. Um, but that's not why I'm here today. Um, I'm here today with a heavy heart and some thoughts I wanted to share out loud. Um, I'm big on YouTube. I love uploading to it, and I have a very specific set of commentators and influences that I follow. Um, I had followed just about everyone for a little while until I felt in my own spirit. I had my own politics straight. I've come a little bit more apolitical as of lately because I've come to realize something. And a matter of fact, I'll find it and download it. Chase Hughes did a really powerful video last night, as everyone who knew Charlie, who knew him personally. I mean, people just openly weeping. Um, and I did some on my own. It's basically had me in my somewhat of a normal state, just with the psychiatric harms of kind of non-functional, a little agoraphobic, not wanting to leave the house. And I end up watching the responses and followed the story really closely. I didn't know Charlie personally, but then again, I did. He was part of my routine literally like every day. There's certain creators, Turning Point and Charlie being one, that I follow religiously because they're Christian. And if nothing else, God gave me a very strong sense to know them by their fruits, so to speak. It's that BS meter that I've talked about before. It's really, really strong in me. Um, the false prophets, ones that I've been around people that, they defended so adamantly 10, 15 years ago. You know, Mostly like I think the mega preachers. Any pastor or preacher that I can knuckle up and say hi to and actually hug, and that needs security and that is traveling all over the world in private planes, I think, have been given over. But Chase pointed out something really interesting because the way this affected me, this heinous murder of this wonderful, wonderful man, kind, and nothing will ever convince me. I had a parasocial relationship with him, and nothing will ever convince me he was totally different off camera. I just watched the story of him and ERIKA talking about how they met and how they started dating and just how made for each other they were. And I mean, viscerally, I felt this like I did. I was alive for 9/11. I just had my second son, who was an infant. I was giving him a bottle, and I remember Good Morning America, or one of the news shows, come on, and they watched it happen. And I remember just the confusion because nobody knew what really happened at first. And then the second plane hit, and then we're hearing about the Pentagon and the one that went down, I think, in Pennsylvania, that was targeted for something else. And like people before me, I was born the year John Kennedy was shot. And I remember my parents and my grandparents, everybody kind of knew where they were when that happened, just like 9/11, and there's some type of connection I haven't figured out yet. It doesn't really matter, to it being on the eve of, in that everybody will remember where they were and what they were doing when they heard the news. Um, no matter what their political leaning is, what their religion, lack thereof is, black, white, gay, straight, this has nothing to do with any of that. Um, I don't even want to get into the sickening, sickening things that I heard on mainstream media, and I just refuse to read. You know, I've seen them on YouTube with some of the commentators that are just enraged by the demonic. There's what else could you possibly call it when somebody is? What have we come to? What have we come to? We're celebrating the death of a man who was trying to do nothing but good. You didn't have to agree with him. Those are the ones that he wanted to talk to the very most, you know. And yeah, he wanted to sway you onto his side, um, because that's the Great Commission. That's what God called Christians to do, you know. And yeah, at first I remember feeling the fear. This feels so biblically prophetic, the persecution. Um, you know, and that's happening everywhere. Christians are just being outcast. It's not anything new historically, but the brazen, blatant way it's being done now. Now I see why my pastors taught me, you know, in those times, how strong and fearless we're going to have to be. I don't know when he's coming back. I know that he is. I know things are kind of lining up. Um, the persecution has begun. Charlie was a martyr. Well, let me tell you, like, some of the ways he really did affect my life. I have a son his age, and a lot of times I would be listening to him and I would forget. It was like I was listening to a 60-year-old man, the wisdom that ran so deep. You know, he described himself as a kind of shy person, but he grew in that process of doing what he chose to do. And he knew Satan was coming for the youth, for this generation in particular. Everything has been lining up for years and years and years. And Chase made such a really good point about this is not, I repeat, this is not about left or right or black or white or trans or gay or any of this stuff. These ideologies that have been shoved down the throats of our young. Um, and I do think social media is a huge culprit because it was planned that way. See, I believe Chase. I think this thing goes it goes higher than Trump. It goes higher than the White House. They, in their own way, they're puppets too. As was Biden, as was Obama, as was Harris, all of them. This goes up higher than that. You know, the people you don't really hear about that operate, you know, in silence. You know, I believe this mass mind control. I don't care what you, if you think I'm a conspiracy theorist. I just don't care because that's basically where it's been. Think about it. They have aligned um, absolutely big pharma, the FDA, the CDC, psychiatry, psychiatric medications, um, our foods, our social media. They've virtually taken books out of school. My youngest, who's 24, went through his entire high school experience with not one textbook. It was all done on Chrome, so they could control what he was fed. They're slowly trying to get rid of historical textbooks, and they're trying to wipe out history because they have prepared for this generation. And let me tell you, regardless of how you feel about Trump or any of his cabinet, there's a lot of believers in them. So I think it's part of the reason why he's so hated. And I don't want to say by the other side, meaning the left. because this really isn't about left or right. This is truly about us, all of those groups of people I just named against them. Them being the people on up so high that they actually control and influence the White House, and Trump's human. I've seen his temptations. Um, Biden obviously gave into it. At what cost? We can say, dementia comes with old age, but no, not always. I once took care of a man that lived to be 96 years old, sharp as a tack. You know, I've worked with a lot of elderly people. Um, it can happen. It can slow down. It can especially happen for people who have been harmed or have bind or neurological disorders as a result of these psychiatric drugs. It's all part of it. It's all been a part of it. And Allie Beth Stuckey was one that I heard about it watching Megyn Kelly. And, she was just in tears, and he hadn't been officially announced dead yet, but, she knew. I guess she had saw it and just kind of knew you're not going to be able to survive that type of an injury. And then I was trying to avoid it, but unfortunately, whatever I was watching last night decided it was Megyn Kelly, because she decided enough was enough as far as mainstream media goes. How they put it, they fired that asshole Matt, whatever his name was, on MS. Oh my God, he was just so vile and heartless in his response. Biden and the rest of the left put out some very generic, one sentence, political violence is never okay kind of stuff. It was a lot better than when we got from mainstream. This guy actually suggested that somebody was firing off a gun in celebration of Charlie, to lead it into guns being the problem. And I'm going to get into my thoughts on that in a minute. But this is really foreign about Charlie. This had an impact on me, like that same kind of feeling. I remember holding my new baby when 911 happened and they hit the towers, and looking at this beautiful little boy and almost feeling like, oh my God, my sweet baby, what have I brought you into? What have I brought you into? That was the early 2000s. It was 2001, obviously. And, things weren't as exposed. It was all being lined up, being set up for such a time as this right now. And I found myself commenting to Allie Beth Stuckey's video, realizing I'm a Christian. I always have been. And I've had this nagging sense for a few years that I've been becoming something that I know Christ is very, very disappointed with. So much so it's in the Bible. You're better off just being a non-believer than being lukewarm. Once you've had the word and you've had it in you and you know him and you've lived your life for him and made your choices and decisions and actions about him, when you went about the Great Commission, whether it be to the masses the way Charlie did, because that's what he was doing every single day of his life. It may have been on any given topic, but the end goal was always to bring people to Christ, knowing if they could change some of these ideologies, it would clear the way. Light will always overtake the darkness. And if you get that one bit of light, that little change into, again, what I always come back to, truth with a capital T, objective, provable, tangible truth. A man cannot become a woman. Um, I don't know anybody who knows that as a biological fact, that hates trans, wants them dead, wants them off the face of the earth, or wants to take away their rights. Um, I think what we're ready to do is take away your obnoxiousness, and you're shoving it down our throats, and you trying to indoctrinate our children. That's what we want to take away. Go live in peace. You're never going to be able to get along with us, not because you hate us, but because we know the truth and you want to live in a lie. The only one that I've seen with any sound logic has been Blair White, and lo and behold, she has come to Christ over the past 6 months or so. Russell Brand, with all the persecution, and I believe very false persecution that he's received and went through, the way he's rebuilt his life from heroin addiction to not only being clean and sober himself, but helping others to do so, being devoted to his wife and his children, carrying on in the face of this, what could be humiliation. You know, the truth is always going to win. They can drag him into court, they can lie, it always comes out in the wash. And the older we get, I think that reaping what we sow, good or bad, happens much more quickly. This is the stuff I saw Charlie trying to impart, especially to our youth. Everybody easily credits him with bringing so many youth to vote for the first time, to vote definitely for the better choice. Trump's human, not the perfect choice. Nobody's perfect, but compared to what was on the table and the cabinet he chose, and I think his own spiritual experience he had as a result of the attempts on his life, um, and his sincerity in wanting our country to be a better, safer place. It makes no sense, and Charlie knew that, and he was trying through reason and truth to teach and to show these kids the truth. For some of the most, I've lived 6 decades on this planet. I don't know everything. I'm wrong a whole lot. But I know Blair White will tell you herself. She knows biologically she is male. She makes no denial about this. People asked her, how are you going to reconcile this with your newly found belief in Christ? I watched that happen into her for years. I knew that was going to happen. And she's just not worried about it right now. She just wants to have a bigger and a better and a healthier influence. There's a litany of different kinds of people, different groups of people that I watch and that I listen to, because I can weed out. It's just a gift. It's just a gift. I don't have many. I'm not brilliant. I'm not beautiful. But I know the truth. Even if I can't articulate what is off in a person, I know it. I know it, my heart of hearts. I know a lie. I've seen, people that have a lot of wealth and material things that are devout Christians. Many people, many families. I was involved with 3 different churches when I came to Georgia. And there is something about Christians seeming to have a nicer life because God provides for them. They have nice homes and they can have nice cars and nice things. And they're also very generous and they're walking the talk. And then you have other ones that have all these things that would indicate and they're speaking it, and you can't quite put your finger on it, but something's off. Something's just a little bit off in their belief. Like when it comes down to it, this is what it is. I know the ones that are different behind closed doors or when they're with certain people. And I believe Charlie was the kind of man that was the same when he was with his wife and his family, maybe even more loving. Um, it was the same Charlie that you saw on the college campuses in the interview with Newsom. They are the same behind closed doors. There's no secret lives. There's no things going on in their life. They would just die if it ever got out, or if anybody ever really knew the truth. And I think that's what it is. And like every Christian, I have struggled watching non-believers seemingly to have these wonderful, beautiful, successful lives, tons of money, gorgeous homes by the beaches, and brand new expensive vehicles, and beautiful healthy kids, and healthy themselves. And some of them even have attitude. If they're not agnostic or atheist, they're angry with God. They think it's a cosmic joke. I've heard that. And yet they seem to continue to prosper. And it's always driven me crazy. And after this week, I think I've just kind of landed in a place where it's none of my business, for one. God knows what he's doing. He knows who really, really loves him, who really follows him, who is willing to die for him. Charlie lived with threats of death every single day of his life. When you have to travel and do what he did and have your own security team, and he was so genuine. Like, he didn't want to be surrounded by a cage or so inaccessible to these kids that he was so passionate about, And so everybody's asking now, where do we go from here? And I think Chase kind of articulated what I was starting to feel. It would be reasonable and understandable for a lot of people to kind of back out for their own safety, which is exactly what they've been trying to get everybody to do. But see, the thing is, like I said, the darkness is expelled with the light, and this goes up really, really high. I talk about, pharmaceutical harms and how where that really starts. That kind of starts in Washington, the special interest groups and lobbyists, and then it goes down to big pharma, and then it goes down to the FDA, and then you have your advertisers and marketers, and then your drug reps, and finally it lands with the psychiatrist. And it's like a big friggin' psyop to me that they would do this to 60 million Americans despite what they know. And legislation has denied informed consent being law, say for about 4 states. I think Delaware was one, where if you're a minor, your parents must have full consent. And I bet you a lot of minors never wound up on these medications because of it, if it's true. But it goes even beyond that. I think it goes beyond the White House. They want us to believe this is about left versus right, gay versus straight, black versus white. It's not, guys. It's a lie. It's a trick. It's a trick. This is happening so far above our heads, and they have gotten this far. This is incredible. This is absolutely astounding that we live in a world where somebody like Charlie Kirk, that's like somebody taking out Billy Graham back in the day, who did the same thing. He was an evangelist. He traveled all over the world, out in the open. It wasn't heard of. And it's not because the internet didn't exist. Things like that didn't happen to this level. and this blatantly and this brazenly. And if it did, you wouldn't be seeing newspaper articles like, yeah, they got him. It just didn't happen. So there's a shift happening on the planet, on the earth. Um, a lot of things line up biblically. I'm not here to be preachy. I'm here to tell you the truth that I know in my spirit and I can see based on what's happening around me. Lukewarm stops today, whatever it's going to take. You know, a lot of you know, I've been going back and forth with kind of staying status quo on the taper dose that I'm down to and or going off. And I have a doctor's appointment coming up this month, and I'm going to do it. I tried to taper, and I was cutting them up myself. You know, I couldn't find any pharmacy that had the solution for this liquid microdosing taper. If you don't know about, ask. So I tried cutting them up, but really do feel strongly that you have to deal with exact dosages. You know, with the SSRIs, you know, maybe you can cut them up and be as close as possible. When it comes to benzos, just for psychological reasons, you know, your brain needs to know exactly how much is being taken away and that it's happening very slowly and that you adjust to each dosage drop, you know. And I think that's the way it's going to go, which will actually mean being prescribed half of a milligram. So it's exactly half. And it's a little bit more. I wanted to do it in quarters. Um, I've been saying that I'm stabilized and I'm okay on the two, and for the most part, that's true. But I am finding myself having more and more down days. By down days, I mean I just don't function. I don't want to leave the house. I don't want to leave my room. I get things done very quickly just to get them out of the way, and I want to be alone. I isolate mostly just because I'm embarrassed. I don't want people, not even my husband, who's never harshly judged, um, to see me that way, you know. And then I kind of went back and forth. Well, you know what? I'm 62. If this is as good as it gets, okay, I can live with this. Um, and but also that thought that I didn't have even a year ago. Like, if somebody told me, you know, I had 6 months to live, um, that would be okay. You know, I wouldn't try to fight it. I'd just let that happen. And, you know, just a few years ago, I just still had a lot of big dreams left. And I realized so much of this is related to becoming lukewarm. Church kind of stopped. Church isn't what makes you a Christian, it's the people in it. It's what you surround yourself is what you'll become. Look what's happened to these kids and what they're hearing, watching, being targeted to watch all the time. And then they surround themselves with like people. And the next thing you know, a otherwise, you know, normal, whatever the hell that is, adolescent who may be struggling with adolescence because it sucks, but you get through it. And, you know, within a short period of time, they've been on their laptop, they've been on their phones, they're meeting friends that you don't know. And the next thing you know, you find out that they become a totally different gender during the day at school, and the school didn't bother to tell you about it. Crazy stuff like that, you know. And now we're getting these young kids. The other one that tried for Trump, you know, was closer to my youngest son's age. You know, what is it about Gen Z that they're so easily able to influence that to this point? that they took away a life that was such a good force in this world, had such a beautiful message, and here's what Charlie left this old lady. I don't want to be lukewarm anymore. I want to jump back in. Church kind of dissipated around COVID. We started watching it online or on TV on Sundays, and even that has kind of faded out. We've had health struggles. We have a lot of good reasons and excuses not to just get up and go and make it a priority so we can connect to others. We've kind of just become isolated in our own little world. My husband, bless his heart, is a very content man. You know, if this was it for the rest of his life, I think he'd be fine, and that's okay. I mean, I think it's easier and maybe simpler to live that way and be that content with your life. But when that happens to me, I don't get content, I get complacent. And then I start isolating. There's been a lot of conflict going on within my family. There's a lot of separation and division going on right now. And that's the opposite of what I want, because where Chase was going with his message about it's not left and right and any of those groups, it's way, way higher than that. These technocrats and mega billionaires, the ones we don't really see or hear about too much, not the ones that are in the news or on YouTube every day. Elon, even Trump is susceptible to this. They even control or try to control and have been controlling the White House successfully. That's why they hate him. They can't control him, but they can control the masses. They proved it with the MK Ultra thing, everything that went down in the 60s, Manson, all of it. They know how to do it. I mean, the internet was like a beautiful gift from hell for them. I always looked at it kind of like money. It could be used for good or evil. And the only way I want to use it now is to put out a message. I think it's real important to help people that have been harmed by these medications, especially benzodiazepine. And I have experience. I have some wisdom. I have some knowledge in that area. And I think it's one of the best things I can do. There are other ways that I make money. It's not a great service. It's a way to make money. This is more of a service, and I believe the people that have come to me, it's all been God-led and God-controlled. And I don't want any more days and weeks like this where I'm not necessarily depressed. I just don't want to function. I am physically very, very tired, and I attributed a lot of that to age. But I mean, just a few months ago, I was talking about getting out there, doing 8 miles a day, walking, and I might do that for a week or two and be highly functional, and then all of a sudden, boom, it just stops. It doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason behind it. I think it has everything to do with bind, with the after effects of the years of psychiatric meds. It's been over more than 20 years since I put everything else down. The SSRIs and all the crap. I don't know what, if any, permanent damage they did. But when did I forget that God is able to rewire a brain instantly? Now, there's a little bit more to it, I think, when it comes to these psychiatric drugs, not as far as God's concerned. But I've seen people instantly delivered, from narcotics or cocaine or meth or something like that. They had a come to Jesus moment, never went back. never went to a 12-step meeting. They dove into the Bible, they dove into God, and they never returned to that drug. They were instantly healed. And then I've seen others come to God through the back door of like 12, the 12 steps keep it very open for a reason. You don't have to be a Christian or even believe in God to benefit. But a lot of people wind up finding God once they're there because you watch a miracle every day. And I realize, I'm feeling it now, just that, blase in my faith. And I think just my heart is just so heavy. Um, I'm sure there'll be reruns, there'll be memorials, and months will go by and it'll slow down. And I'll be watching to see what Turning Point will do, because we can't give up. We can't give up. What if this isn't going to go over too big? Or people might say too soon. Um, but they've found this kid, this Tyler Robinson. Apparently, a friend contacted his father, and somehow clergy um, got him to come forward, or wound up calling the FBI or whatever powers that brought him in. What if, and I will bet you, like I said, I don't know Charlie, I don't know ERIKA, but I know they were devout Christians. And I know Charlie knew the Bible. I know that he knew Jesus. He knew him. And he had a deep relationship with him. And with living with death threats every single day, I'm sure, I can almost guarantee it, I don't know, but I know him and ERIKA probably had discussions about what he would want her to do. And my best guess is Charlie would probably forgive this guy. Hold up. I'm not saying justice shouldn't be served. It should, and it probably will with his life. That being said, and no, we serve a just God. Now, a lot of bad people get away with a lot of bad things for a long time, but if you don't get yours in this lifetime, there isn't going to really be a lifetime to come. And what there is going to be isn't going to be, there's no en-suites in hell. You're not going to have your cozy comforts of home. And when did that start becoming, yeah, I know, to me? And I'm confessing to everybody right now that's exactly what happened. People would remind me, or my husband would send me a little scripture or a quote, and I didn't resent it by any means, but it just sounded like the Charlie Brown teacher. Wah, wah, wah. I know. And I do know. So why am I laying in this room watching TV for days and weeks on end? Some of it has to do with the bind, but I know I do better with other people than I do myself, and that can't be. I don't want to coach or help anybody through something that I'm actually not doing. And when I started this and started the certifications, I was doing all of it. And then I started to go into a little bit of a slump. I was legitimately sick. But, people still get up and go to work and function and go about their day even when they're sick. And that's all it takes for me to kind of go down. And I don't know how much of it is related to the bind. I suspect the vast majority of it. But I also know I've been pretty useless for God. I would say since COVID, it did, with the bind, I had a very, very neurological effect. My husband had a physical effect. He almost died, especially with the first strain. He has his own medical issues. And no insurance at the time, and almost lost him. With me, it was more neurological. I was able to function, take care of him, but I got like the weird smells and the brain farts. Like I would be at the intersection down the street, and I take a right to come home, as I've done 1,000 times. And that first year after getting COVID, I remember just sitting at the light. It's a red light. There's no other cars. I can go, and there'd be like a 3 to 7 second delay till somebody was beeping at me. Go, go. What are you doing? What are you doing, lady? And that happened a lot. My senses are still super, super sensitized, highly sensitized, like gross smells. Nobody likes them, I get that, but I'm particularly sensitive to it. Like it can almost trip up a depression. Just as pleasant smells can lift my spirits. When I get into those funks, as we've come to label them, light is tough. Very highly sensitive to the very sunlight I love. And when it comes to walking and exercising, I might hit the treadmill on a rainy day or something. It's not the same. Yes, I get the same health benefit from it, the cardio, the increased heart rate, the better brain chemicals get released, but not the way they do walking outside in the sun, or even on a cloudy day, even during a light rain. And, winter, my least favorite season, is coming, but they're a lot less brutal here in Georgia than they were in Massachusetts, so I can still get out there. And it's unfair. It's unfair to my husband, who hasn't complained a lot. And I can get out there and I can really kick ass, but not for a long time. Whether it's the bind or whatever it is in me, I notice that it's increased and it's worse since my connection to God seems distant. Now, I never base that relationship on feelings. It is great when you feel the presence of the Holy Spirit and God is all around you. I felt more like Charlie's been all around me, whatever that is. Some Christians might call that a sin, and eyes off Jesus. Not at all. Not at all. The impact, we don't know how, when, or why people are going to cross our path. Sometimes it's for a minute, sometimes for it's a season, sometimes it's for life, and sometimes it can be a 31-year-old guy that goes around talking to young men, my son's ages, and trying to put them on the right path, and succeeded with many. And probably why this kid hated him. Look at what we're hating. Just because it has something to do with Trump or anybody he appointed. I mean, Kennedy's trying to make our food edible again and safe, to keep our kids safe from harm. He got mercury out of the vaccines. What's wrong with that? Part of what's wrong with it is Big Pharma might lose a little bit of money because that preservative won't be in there, so they're going to have to make more of it. Oh, instead of 60 billion this year, it might only be 48. Suck it up, Buttercup. Cry me a frickin' river. We're hating stuff that we all want. Look around at your Republican and your Democratic neighbors. We all want the same things. We have more in common than we don't. Stop letting them up on high do this to us. We all want safe, We, we want to let our kids out. We want to let our teenagers get into our car and drive out downtown and go out for dinner, or maybe have a drink if they have a designated driver. We want to know they can do that, and the chances of them being shot and killed, especially because they might believe differently than some other drunk guy in the bar or vice versa, is relatively low. We want to put a roof over their heads. We want to be healthy. We want them to be healthy. We want our grandkids to be healthy. Look at what we're hating. Look at what we're hating. Look at what we're killing people for, that are advocating for a safer, more secure America. Let's I think the idea is pretty clear here. Let us get straightened out first. I see people losing benefits, not being able to get certain benefits. But we have immigrants come in here, working a job that an American can work, that literally have an app that's paid for like Lyft and Uber, to get to their medical appointments that are all paid for. A big fat food stamp card, nice places to live. I'm not going to dox these people, but I drive them around all day, from job to job, from house to house. Very nice people, very sweet people, but maybe one of my friends or their kids need that job, that they'll have to pay taxes on, and the employer will have to pay taxes on, and that they'll have to pay a fair wage to. They're using these people for slave labor. And of course, we all know of the atrocities and the crimes that they've committed. Why are we fighting so hard to bring them back into this country? We all want the same things. This isn't about left and right and Democrat and Republican or even super progressive or alt-right. It's not. It goes higher than that. If they can get us fighting and against each other, they can do anything. They can do anything. If they can get to the White House, in my opinion, as easily as they did in the Biden administration, then a lot of power trickles down from there. And is this really all about hating Trump? No. Satan is using Trump as a distraction. He is using politics and our beliefs and such as a distraction. Look at how we can't be without our phones for a minute. I have a hard time. If I'm sitting in a doctor's office waiting on an appointment, I remember just sitting there and flipping through magazines. I'm scrolling away. A lot of my time in my head is filled and consumed. I watch a lot of YouTuber, and I do watch relatively Christian things, and things that I don't consider such mind rot. To be honest, I don't like most of the platforms, but I do see where like TikTok and YouTube can be used for the good, can be used to tell the truth. Maybe somebody that thinks it was great that this wonderful, sweet, humble, kind, generous man was murdered by a bullet through his neck, and wants to know who they can do next, might come across it. God, if you want to use me to pierce their soul at any given moment, do it. Show me how to do it. Show me what you want me to do, and then give me the energy and the stamina and the fortitude to get up and do it. We started off pretty strong and good, And I know you don't move and you didn't turn away. I know you will never leave or forsake me. So something happened within me, and that's why I'm again willing, like I said, this recovery from psychiatric drug harms is never linear. It's easier for some, it can go quicker for some. But the biggest message I want everyone to take is that it does happen. I finally, in the middle of my mourning, literally for Charlie, got the information I have not been able to get, which was basically, is it even recommended to taper completely off after 35 years? And given my age, there is a very significant risk of increased dementia with this. That's a known fact. I found a lot of counteractions for that. Exercise, particular supplements. They just found lithium ornate, not the prescription drug, the actual supplement, the dietary lithium ornate, which, by the way, we sell. My husband's medical license allows us to sell for companies. You have to have a medical license to obtain, like Pure Encapsulations. I know they have this lithium ornate in different milligrams. You can check that out at betterbytheday.info. But they also found that can both prevent and reverse dementia. So I've kind of I've done a lot of research and working around it, because I've been on it for so long. I've done a relatively large taper, but I've kind of plateaued at this 2 milligram thing for a while now. And, but hearing, even at my age and older, that the less you take and if you come off, it does actually reverse. I've always had that sense, and it's been backed up by the research that I've done, that the brain will indeed rewire. Neuroplasticity is a thing. There's a lot of supplements, exercise. There's a ton of things you can do to try to slow that process down if you're still on it and you're still in the middle of a taper. But that was really good news. That gave me a lot of hope to know, it actually got me every time I quit smoking, coming from a family of heavy cigarette smokers, and every time I quit smoking, the biggest motivation was, you take a smoker's lungs, which I've been really lucky. All my chest x-rays, like, doctors never suspected I smoked. But, if there is evidence there, they say that too, after 5 years, your lungs return to a state of almost a non-smoker. So, the brain is always trying to bring the body back into homeostasis, into the way God intended and created it to function and be. And when we go against that natural design that He made us, things go awry, and the brain will constantly seek to get your attention to bring you back to homeostasis. Unfortunately, I think with benzos, it becomes part of that homeostasis. It becomes part of that natural balance of the function of the brain that was never meant to be. And I believe it's part of this bigger plan of the powers that be, way above the White House, the ones you don't hear too much about, that aren't big in the public light, that have been planning this and knew exactly how to execute it in a rapid amount of time. But there was a slow, sneaky build up to it. I think throughout the 90s and, probably until like 2007 or 8, around the time I moved to Georgia, this stuff was still shocking. And it was Megyn Kelly, I think, just out of rebellion of the mainstream media and what they try to hide. She actually showed the entire clip of the young girl on the train, Arena. I don't want to butcher her last name. because it looked so casual. But the point she was trying to make, she showed the whole thing, and her hand trying to. But the point I think she was trying to make is all the people that stood around. Um, it was the people that didn't see it happen that actually tried to help. One guy eventually took off his shirt and tried to slow down the bleeding, and people started calling for help. Um, and unfortunately, it was too late. But I grew up in a world when you see a person, that fell down in the grocery store or something, an older person, any age. Oh my gosh, are you okay? Can I help you? And we just did it, or we didn't even ask. It was just automatic. You go over and help that person. If you see an elderly person walking a distance to put their shopping cart away, let me get that for you. We just did it. It was a given. We have lost all sense of decency and just common manners and putting a hand out to our fellow man. It's almost like a fear has grown. We don't know if this person is going to stab us if we go over and try to help them. That's just built in me. It's just built in me. It wasn't even the way I was raised. Although my family was relatively polite, but they were more ones that were like, let's get away from this situation. And I, ever since I was little, was more the one, well, let's see if they're okay. One of my kids, even, I was giving them a ride home, and I saw an area of the highway that was burning. And I knew it wasn't a campsite or anything like that. I knew it instinctively wasn't right. This is what they're doing to this generation. It was just, of course, I'm going to call 911 and report it. This was a big, long ass fire. And I remember my child was horrified. No, embarrassed. No, don't do that. Don't do that. It's probably just, that's a generational thing. He wasn't raised that way. My oldest, our big thing was litter bugs. No, we don't litter ever. We don't walk by a piece of trash on the ground and not pick it up, even if that meant putting the dirty trash in our car until we could get to a rubbish barrel. It's just what we did. We would never dream of walking by and seeing someone in distress and not reaching out to help. I just had an incident recently where I forgot my keys. I was walking my dog, and a neighbor, like, literally steps away, had the door wide open. I could hear him loud and clear on his phone. And I walked up to his steps, and he was so engrossed in whatever he was doing. It sounded like some kind of business thing. He was so engrossed in what he was doing. I was saying, sorry to bother you. And I was trying to get his attention. Couldn't do it until he turned around and actually saw me. And he was like, what? What? And I was like, I'm so sorry. Could you just open the gate? I forgot my key. I'm busy. That's just like, I'm not angry at him. That's just the way it is now. And it's not okay. It's not okay. It's not your progressives. It's not your liberals. It's not your Republicans. It's not your transgenders. It's not your homosexuals. It's not black people. It's not white people. It is them. These are spiritual powers, and they cannot be fought in the flesh. There is only one solution. What would happen if we collectively, as Christians, made sure justice was served on Charlie's murderer, but decided to forgive him? What if we all decided to respond? Charlie himself, I heard him quote, love your enemies, annoys them, laugh out loud. But what would happen to them if every time they killed one of us, it just banded us closer and closer together and brought more people to God. And we showed nothing but compassion and forgiveness, as hard as that is. God Himself said, hey, it's easy to love people who love us. The real challenge goes, and can we love the people that have hurt us the very most? And I got some family members that I need to listen to my own words with. They will never apologize. They will never acknowledge. And at one point I felt very justified, and I'm done. And one, I'm sure she won't ever be able to face me. Um, and the other one would. Well, and I don't want any more hate in my heart. I don't want to be alone in my life. I want my fellow Christians around me. I want my family around me. I want my sons close to me. And I think that's the only way we're going to be able to get off this off ramp. What other choice do we really have? Rebel? Stop behaving the way they behave? Stop what we're doing? Stop speaking out? Kill our own free speech? Because there's a chance we'll be shot? Hey, look, God knew the second you were going to be born. You were fearfully and wonderfully made. You were knitted in your mother's womb. He knew the hour of your birth. He knows the hour of your death. I'm just a big believer, if it's your time, nothing's going to stop it. If it's supposed to be prevented, if there's supposed to be an intervention of some sort to glorify God, then that will happen too. So thank you, Charlie. Thank you. Thank you for leaving this old girl with that particular heart and understanding that need to stay closer, to get closer, to make the most of what's left of the rest of my life. I'm literally old enough to be your mother. I have a son your age, and you left me with that gift. I think you would forgive him. I'm not saying he should not be punished, even with his life, but I think you would forgive him. I think you and ERIKA probably had a lot of talks about what you would want her to do should anything like this happen. I don't know. I haven't been a fly on your wall, but I saw your spirit, and it was beyond believable. And if no other gifts of the Spirit, I have the gift of discernment. I can smell fake and phony a mile away. Love your enemies. That's been lost. That's been lost among Christians since we went politically cuckoo. And we're blaming it all on the White House. Let me tell you guys, it goes way beyond that. The White House are their puppets. Think more along the lines of they're big donors, the people in the background, the real puppet masters. And for God's sakes, shut off your phone, shut off your TV, be productive, touch grass, do anything besides nothing. So again, goodbye, my brother Charlie. May you rest in peace, ERIKA and your babies. I know God's holding you closer and tighter right now, and He'll never let go. And one day you're going to be okay. Nobody can tell you when it's time to stop grieving and mourning. Get away from them if they do. And I've never lost a man of that caliber, especially in such a horrific way. But I'm sure you guys talked about it, and you know what Charlie would want. I do. I never even met the guy. I think he would forgive him. And I think if all of us forgive all of them, not saying don't bring justice, we serve a just God. Sometimes He takes care of it personally, and other times He puts people in charge. This is why the Bible talks about respecting and praying for our authority, our government, our policemen, you know, because the system is very broken. Yes, there's a lot of, especially in politics, there's a lot of corruption, but it comes from even higher than that. So, on that note, Charlie, rest in peace. And thank you. Thank you so much. You don't know how many lives you changed. You do for the people that stood in front of you, but there's a lot of people that never did, whose lives you touched, reshaped, and reformed. And then by your death, you touched them even more deeply. I am sure you are hearing, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. Come with me." Thanks again, brother.